Her talk tonight explores the potential for ecological green infrastructure in Vancouver and region. Using examples of best practices from other cities, particular attention is given to plant selection and native pollinators, especially bees, and the wider food web. Christine Thuring is also a board member of the Native Bee Society of BC. So please welcome Christine.
Thanks so much for that intro, Janet. It's great to be here. We were just recalling before, I used to be a regular member and participant with Nature Vancouver, or Vancouver Natural History Society as it was called. So I'm really delighted to share with you tonight what I've been working on for many years, and for which there are many new opportunities here in Vancouver. I'm really pleased to see one of my colleagues from City Vancouver is here. Hey, Rob Lukes. And I'm hoping that what I share with you all tonight will be interesting, possibly inspiring and motivating. So with no further ado, I'm going to share my screen. Can you see?
Yes.
Yeah, okay, so I'm going to put this into slideshow. Does that look okay on your screens? Okay, great. All right. Okay, so this is the poster. This is why we're all here today. So thanks to Nature Vancouver again for hosting and for making this happen. Let's see, how do I move? Okay, there we go. So the title of my talk, as you well know, is Ecology in the City. So I've been interested in the potential of green infrastructure for about 20 years. I've been working in that field. So this is the rough outline of what we'll cover today. It's going to be about 45 minutes, and I do cover a range of territory. So I'm hoping that you'll accompany me on the ride, that I will capture your imagination for the stretch and not lose you. Feel free to put any questions into the chat box as they arise, and we can address them at the end. So let's start with, we'll start with the intro. So thank you, Janet, for that lovely intro. Yeah, so I'm a collaborative ecologist. My background is applied plant ecology, and I've worked in a variety of different ways. I did start off, you know, doing restoration ecology, species at risk surveys, population assessments. In 1999, I discovered the world of green roofs, and I've never been the same. So as a collaborative ecologist, I strive to integrate ecological understanding into the design and construction of life-affirming systems. I consider nature my primary teacher. I'm enthused by intersectionality, which is the new term, I think, for transdisciplinary collaboration. And my work is informed by science, but guided by practice. So chlorophyllosity is kind of that's my creative outlet for kind of pursuing my interests. Often consulting is the best way to do that. And this is the only image I'll show you from my PhD research, but this is a 20-year-old green roof in Stuttgart, Germany. I was using traditional tools of plant ecology. This is the botany section, so I figure I can nerd out a bit with you folks. So moving on. Yeah, Janet alluded to my work at BCIT. So I've worked at the Center for Architectural Ecology in various capacities since 2006. I teach the GROW courses, and a recent project, which is shown in this image, asks the question, if you build it, will they come? So that is, will native plants and nest boxes on a green roof attract and support wild bees? So I won't share any of that work with you because we're putting a publication together. The website for the center is greenroof.bcit.ca. Lots of great resources there. Still in the intro here, I also coordinate the Green Roof Info think tank. So this is a network of businesses, government agencies. Oh, sorry, Nina, I'll answer Nina's question. She asked, what are the GROW courses? Let's go back. Sorry, the GROW courses are the Green Roof courses at BCIT. So it's the nuts and bolts of green roof technology, design, implementation, and maintenance. It's part-time, it's on the part-time studies roster, so these courses are offered twice a year. And they're always very interesting. It's a huge range of disciplines that participate in these courses. Thanks for that question. Right, so the Green Roof Info think tank is just a network of businesses, agencies, nonprofits, researchers, and community members who are united on the desire to see wider spread implementation of green roofs in the Pacific Northwest. So this is a really fun, but also, well, you know, almost potentially like a lobby group. We recently wrote an op-ed for the province about the role that green roofs can play during these pandemic times for secure green spaces. So yeah, the GRIT is a really fun group. We have a strong affinity with our friends down in Portland, Oregon, where this idea first started. And yeah, if you fancy getting involved or you're interested at all, just send me an email and I'll add you to our list. This picture is an excursion that I organized last summer to the Vancouver Convention Centre Green Roof. And actually you'll note the person here in the front in blue who is levitating is our colleague Maureen Connolly, who is the founder and director of the center. Do you recognize her, Janet? We used to work together. Yeah. And the last part of my intro that I wanted to applaud is the Native Bee Society of British Columbia. So I am a board member here, and we are quite a young society. This photo is from our AGM, our first ever AGM in November. And we're a collective of scientists, artists, managers, and enthusiasts working to promote the conservation of native bees in British Columbia. So check out our website and consider joining us and supporting our work. Okay, so let's move on to the content. We'll start with the context. So this image is something that I always come back to ever since I first saw it in 2012. So the Cities and Biodiversity Outlook report was published by the Convention on Biological Diversity in 2012, and basically stated that of the area predicted to be urban by 2030, 60% has yet to be built. So for me, this image is just very compelling. It kind of looks like a time bomb. It definitely suggests the window of opportunity is now, it's urgent, and I just see it as a call to action. So this is what motivates me, and I think any of us who are working in the built environment, certainly with green infrastructure, should really heed this call. So this is my personal heeding of the call. I'm also very conscious that we are actually in the last year of the UN decade on biodiversity. We are in an extinction cascade right now. So for me, biodiversity is it's just so important. So this is the context of how I want to hold this presentation, and I'm hoping that I will skillfully deliver that intention. Okay, so let's move on. So what is green infrastructure? This image, I feel, conveys it quite nicely. You'll notice this is kind of like a green roof. In very simple visuals, it's suggesting that the green roof is kind of reconnecting the footprint of that building to the greater landscape. So that's sort of a visual. We can look at it technically as well. So this is a quote, definition of green infrastructure that I quite like from the EPA. So green infrastructure, you'll notice that I do turn into an acronym, GI. It's a lot easier that way. So green infrastructure is the range of measures that use plant or soil systems or other permeable surfaces or substrates to store, infiltrate, or evapotranspirate stormwater and, crucially, reduce flows to sewer systems or to surface waters. So it's all about clean water. It's about clean water, surface waters and ecosystems. So in other words, GI is a method of reducing the impact of the built environment by replicating the natural environment. So here we've kind of got these two images of kind of cross sections of two landscapes. One is a natural landscape, the other is an urban one. And we're looking at, it's meant to demonstrate how the hydrology changes. And of course, water is life. So in the urban catchment, you'll notice there's not much evapotranspiration happening. There's not much groundwater recharge. So there's very few opportunities for infiltration, percolation. Instead, water is captured and runs off and is delivered straight to surface waters. Compared to the natural catchment where the hydrological cycle is intact, lots of wetlands to clean the water, lots of vegetation and soils, lots of capacity to infiltrate the soils and also to evaporate into the atmosphere. So the reason this is so important, and this is why it's important for anyone who's interested in the biosphere, stormwater runoff is a form of non-point source pollution. That means it's derived from many diffuse sources. So as runoff moves over and through the ground, it picks up pollutants and it deposits them into surface waters. So you can see this nice graphic at the bottom right. That's from the Rain City Strategy, which Vancouver has produced. So at the end is that drain, which basically leads out the pipe. And that water, as it moves through the urban landscape, is picking up loads of horrible stuff. Let's just say you wouldn't want to drink the water. And if that water flooded, you would not want to be in it either. So stormwater runoff is a big deal. To really bring it home, yeah, it is a big deal. It's bad news in places especially that have combined sewers. So stormwater is often combined with sewer infrastructure. So when we have big rain events, what that does in those pipes is something like a flash flood. So that can lead to overflows, which leads to beach closures. This is the last thing I'm going to say about this. Basically, combined sewage overflows are not uncommon in Vancouver. So this is a graph over 5 years, and you can see in 2017, nearly 40 million cubic meters of untreated sewage was released through combined sewage overflows into the surface waters around Vancouver. So this has huge implications, obviously for the marine environment, but for everything. So Vancouver has really taken this on board, and in November of just last year, Vancouver City Council unanimously approved the Rain City Strategy, which is an ambitious initiative focused on water and green infrastructure. And I won't speak too much about it. The only thing that I will share from that strategy is the reason for its ambition. See at the very top, the target is to capture and clean 90% of rainfall in the city. That's very ambitious. And green infrastructure is the key to accomplishing that. So while we're talking about ambition, some of you may have heard about the Oakridge Centre. So this will actually be the largest development in Vancouver's history, which is pretty exciting. But for green roof people, it's super exciting because this is 9 acres of rooftop green space. So this is a rendering that was published, I think, yeah, in 2018. And looking a bit more at what that roof area might look like, it's projected to be super diverse. So this 9-acre rooftop park will include 6 concept areas, everything from facilities for concerts and kind of formal roof gardens to I like this rendering of the Meadow Gardens. You can see the roof gardens nearby. basically you wouldn't know that this was a green roof, but this is green infrastructure. I have to show at least one figure, and this is the one. So because combined sewage overflows are such important issues in so many cities that have combined systems, a lot of cities already promote green roofs specifically for the stormwater mitigation benefit. So I just want to direct your attention to the figure, to the graph. So you'll see on the y-axis, at the top is indicating there's been a rainfall event. And then at the bottom on the x-axis over time, you'll see we've got a conventional roof and we've got a green roof. And see the effect that the green roof has on that runoff. So not only does the runoff volume decrease significantly, but it's released much later. It's released much, quite a period after the runoff, the rain event. So for combined sewer overflows, that is a saving grace. That could mean that there will not be a combined sewage overflow at all. And just to say, you know, Vancouver's a wet coastal city, rainforest climate, but green roofs are effective here as well for that function of stormwater retention and delayed runoff. So I'm not going to go into this graph too much. I just want to direct your attention to, so the purple lines are rain, and then the other two lines are two types of green roof. Actually, this data was collected at the Green Roof Research Facility where Janet and I worked together for a while. So in the winter, you can see that the green roofs tend to be pretty close in runoff, but in the summer, let's see if it's going to work. Yeah, in the summer months, there's a huge benefit. So any rain events basically release no runoff at all. And that's actually worth quite a lot. And anyway, green roofs have so many more benefits beyond just stormwater. So I'm not going to list them all here. However, I do want to move into more other forms of green infrastructure, and there's a lot of things that other forms of green infrastructure do as well. So, you know, biodiversity, urban heat island, well-being, air quality. These are all benefits that green infrastructure can do at the same time. It's multifunctional in that way. So, on the aquatic side, green infrastructure protects the ecosystems and organisms at the end of the pipe. Portland, Oregon has a fantastic rain garden stormwater management program called Green Streets. And if you I'll just direct your attention to the center of their logo. There's a salmon right at the heart of it. So that's really what it's all about on the aquatic side. But then terrestrially, green infrastructure enhances life for urban citizens too, whether it's rooftop farms or, you know, landscape level ponds, trees. This image on the right is the Cantonella Hospital of Basel. And actually, would you believe, you can see it down bottom right, there's a nice little pond, or it looks like a river. There's lots of big trees. That is actually on top of the parking garage. So that's actually a green roof as well. But yeah, vegetation, soils, nature, so many benefits for human well-being as well. This is my chance to take a drink. Beautiful projects. And now to the point of this presentation and what we'll talk about for the remaining half hour. Green infrastructure can enhance life for non-humans too. So what is the ecological potential of green infrastructure then? The key word that, if I could just nail this into everyone's memory, it's multifunctional. That is the word. All these different qualities relate to one simple installation, you know? So whether it's a park or a green roof or a bioswale or a rain garden, it's doing all these things all at the same time. And that's what makes green infrastructure so elegant. Now, the key thing is, does it support wildlife? Is it pollinator friendly? Does it support birds? So that's what we're going to look at for the rest of the talk. Because just because it's green doesn't mean it's ecological, right? So this is a wonderful example, green roof. It's called a biosolar roof when you've got PV panels, photovoltaic panels integrated with green roofs. Super great symbiotic technology. But as you can see from the sedum vegetation, there's not that much structure or floral resources for, say, bees. In terms of biodiversity, this kind of landscape would be kind of like a desert, not too ecological in that sense. Still better than gravel though. Okay, now I want you to put on your thinking caps. Sorry, that's the teacher in me. We're taking a bee break. So I want all of you to, Denis is going to create a poll, and you have an opportunity to hazard a guess or share your knowledge. How many species of bee do you think are native to BC? Okay, so Denis, you might have to talk us through it because I'm not sure how it works. Okay, Nina is voting 5 in the chat. I think there should be an option to do a poll as well. There you go.
Okay, so I've launched the poll. The only question, I've done this wrong. Only question 1 is being addressed now. So I'm voting for.
How do you vote?
You click.
I can't vote, I guess.
Oh, that's right. The organizer can't vote, but the.
Okay, as long as everyone else can.
Right. So you should see on your screen a poll that says how many species of bee, and please click on one of the numbers. And only answer the first question.
You can't vote unless you answer all of them.
Oh, really? All the questions?
Okay, well then, I have to apologize. We'll have to do this later. Oh.
Well, actually, I mean, the questions below are pretty easy.
Yeah, we could answer all of the questions below. It's the same question repeated over and over.
Yeah,
and then please give us the answer to number 1.
So if it helps with the questions below, the insects on the screen are bees, so you can just click yes on those. But the real question is number 1.
Oh, just wait a minute, Denise sorting something out here.
All in progress. Oh, I see. So I have, okay, listen. Oh, okay, some people answering. Okay, fine.
Well, people are being able to answer.
But I think you have to click on every one of them, just yes, yes, yes.
Yes.
What do you mean?
Okay.
Yes, yes, yes.
Hoi, mommy!
Oi, good.
Hey!
From Waterloo.
Yeah.
I put in all of these. I thought they were going to come out as separate polls, but they're all questions in one poll that are required for answers. So
But we haven't seen them.
Looks like 60% have voted.
Wow, okay.
But let's just leave it at that. Okay?
I'm ending the poll.
Okay.
And we get the result.
Okay, so well done for those who managed to do the poll in the first place. So how many species of bee do we think are native to BC? Well, you know what? This is all, it's kind of emerging knowledge. There's a lot that we don't know about bees, but the answer is more than 400. There are over 483 confirmed species of bees native to BC.
Yeah.
And some even estimate there might be over 600. They come in all colors, shapes, sizes, functions. Very, very diverse. I've heard them described as nature's Swiss Army knife because they have so many different ecological functions. So there you go. Now, a recent study recorded 56 species in the city of Vancouver alone. So that is really saying quite a lot for what our opportunities are with urban green infrastructure. Because of course, what do bees need? Well, we'll get into that now. So how can green infrastructure benefit native bees? Well, probably most people nowadays know that bees are having difficulty, having some major challenges. And the main problems have been identified to be habitat loss, pesticides, diseases and invasive species, and climate change. If you look closely at this bee on this picture, you'll see that she's got all these bumps on her back. I believe those are mites, which are really horrible. So a lot of challenges facing bees. So if we just consider what the solutions are to these problems, in the case of habitat loss, well, the solution there is to protect existing habitat, rewild any lost habitat, and create more habitat. So that's definitely an option for green infrastructure. For pesticides, the solution there is simply to reduce and regulate pesticide use. So that's coming into sort of the maintenance side of things on green infrastructure. With regards to the pressures caused by diseases and invasive species, this would suggest caution is required with regards to exotic species. And I do just remind everyone that honeybees are not native to BC, and in fact, they tend to be vectors. So they're the ones that, because of just the way they are managed, do tend to be prone to pathogens that then affect wild bees as well. I liken it actually to salmon. Farm salmon affect wild salmon in the sense that farm salmon are, kept in such tight quarters. They tend to proliferate, whether it's sea lice or viruses, and that of course gets out into the natural environment and affects the wild species too. And then the fourth challenge is climate change. So the solution there is to reduce CO2 emissions and also consider carbon sequestration. And that can play into green infrastructure if we just imagine if we're planting perennials, woody species that just are actually sequestering carbon instead of, say, in the urban environment, we often see, annual plantings, petunias and what have you, that are constantly changed. Every time we do that, there's lost carbon sequestration opportunities. So we can look at it in quite a complex way if we choose. But let's look specifically now at how can GI benefit native bees. So there's 4 principles that, that we suggest. Pollinator-friendly plantings, planting for diversity, providing nesting sites, and avoiding pesticides. So let's go through those. So native plants evolved with native bees and vice versa. So pollinator-friendly plantings will use native plants. In some cases, native plants aren't available on a commercial basis. So that's where you could use nativars instead. Since this is the botany section of Nature Vancouver, I won't go into too much detail on the importance of native plants. And planting with diversity in mind in terms of species, colors, and bloom times is also a really important thing to do for wild bees. So I'm including here a spreadsheet that my colleague and friend Marika put together for the Environmental Youth Alliance where she works. Marika is the Vice President of the Native Bee Society. And yeah, I just direct your interest to some of the columns on the right. You'll see they're quite colorful. So those basically reflect the flowering period. So the ideal planting, of course, will have plants that flower early in the season and plants that flower late in the season to just really ensure that there is forage for wild bees and other pollinators throughout the season. There's also certain planting style that diversity includes in this regard. So if we plant in drifts or clumps, effectively we're mimicking natural patterns of how plants actually assemble naturally on their own. And this kind of creates, it reduces the travel time for bees. So that's also a useful method too. Now, the third principle was the importance of nesting material and sites. And this is something that, I confess, I didn't know much about a year ago. But so I'd love to talk just about this, but it will be restricted to a few slides. So wild bees, recalling how many we have, they all have different habits. And the majority of our bees are solitary. That means they don't need hives. They don't even need each other. They are solitary. So there's different methods or means of nesting. So on the very left, we've got colony type nests. So bumblebees are our only social bee, aside from honeybees. So they build their nests in anything of an appropriate size and material. It could be old rodent burrows or thatched ground, even bird boxes. They build these really cute little pots for their eggs, for their larvae. And then in the center of the screen here, above ground nesting. So there's other groups of bees, mason bees and leafcutter bees, for example, who nest above ground in trees, shrubs, logs, or grasses. They would use materials like mud, leaves, or resin, which they collect from conifers, to build their little capsules. So this looks like could be a piece of bamboo that perhaps a mason bee has built a series of little egg compartments. So Jen and Rick and Kelowna asked, what is thatched ground? Good question. So, I mean, I guess it relates to thatch, right? So when vegetation becomes quite matted and kind of holds air, so it's almost like having a cave that's made out of sort of this, thatched materials. Sorry, I can't give a better answer right now anyway. Okay, and then the third kind of nesting type is underground. So soil dwelling bees. And in this case, you know what? This is all over the place. We would call it a bad part of the lawn that we don't like very much. It's great for bees. So it could be bare ground, it could be sandy. I'm just going to show you a little video of what that might look like. So who would know that was a little burrow? Sometimes if you just watch, you'll see the most amazing things. So mining bees and sweat bees are ground nesters. And there's a little bit more to say about that as well. So whether this is your garden or your lawn, there's certain materials you can look out for. So for example, if you've got plants on your property that are from the rubus genus, so blackberry, raspberry, these are great for stem nesting bees. So basically you can actually cut them and leave them and watch them, and you may see that they get colonized. And then going back to the ground nesters, dry sandy areas where grass is patchy are favored by many ground nesting species. So the best thing is to just leave them be. If you do need to do maintenance, like mowing or watering, just do it after the bees are home. Bees, if they're out foraging and they come back and you've mowed the lawn, they're not gonna be able to see where their burrow is because they've lost all their points of reference. So a little bit of attention to maintenance can go a long way in supporting bees. So just save your maintenance after the bees are snug in their burrows, i.e., after dark. And in the summer, it doesn't get that dark that late or that early. The fourth and final principle of designing GI for bees is the pesticide issue. It is a huge issue. I was just reading some documents from the Xerces Society, from which this graphic on the right is from, and it is absolutely shocking how widespread pesticides are. So bees can get exposed in a number of different ways, and these relate to the graphic on the right, which you might want to look at. Basically, there may be direct and or residual contact with spray. So either it's right on the flower or comes to the flower soon after it's been sprayed. It can also be through ingestion of contaminated pollen and nectar. So you'll see the third image down, you see the little, it looks like a leaf cutter bee flying away with its perfect circle of leaf, which has been sprayed and is therefore poisonous. And then the fourth contamination or exposure bit is from when nesting sites or materials get directly sprayed. So that bottom picture in that figure. And I included the image of like the disfigured bee, just to kind of convey that it's a horrible death. And there's been a lot of research into the different ways that pesticides affect bees, and it's really, really terrible. So we just need to really kick the habit. And if we know, just be aware that when you go to a garden center, certain plants are actually treated with neonicotinoids, and that exposure can be on that plant for months, if not years. So it's actually, it's in the pollen, it's in the nectar. So it is quite pervasive. Okay, now before we get into some examples, I just wanted to add the fact that plantings that benefit bees will benefit other taxa too. So this really is a whole system, has a wide-reaching benefits when we design for bees. Obviously, we won't have berries if we don't have pollinators, right? I just include this in case there's any birders in the group. Okay, so what does green infrastructure for biodiversity actually look like? So we're going to go through the different kinds of green infrastructure. So I thought I'd start off with private gardens because many of us have gardens, I'm sure. And I actually just decided to go for a habitat garden that I designed in the UK as my example. So this is a before image. Basically, the Batemans wanted to have hedgehogs again. And they just kind of cleared up this back part of their long garden, and they wanted a pond and all these things. So this is the before. This is sort of the master plan. You can see I put in a pond. I put in a wooded bank at the right with various sized trees and shrubs. And then the large expanse with that funny pattern is a wildflower meadow. There's also habitat structures all over the place, log piles, bird baths, basically chocker block habitat. So this was the pond, first pond I ever built. Looks a lot better now. And one thing really struck me that first season was just how many bees there were in the pond. I could not get over it. They were bathing, they were drinking. You can see that bee's got her tongue out even. So water is just so important for life in general. There's just a glimpse of the wildflower meadow, and we actually put a green roof on the little shed there too. So that was a wonderful little project. How about green roofs? So green roofs are green infrastructure too. This is a lovely project in Basel. So yeah, Switzerland was the first place to do research to validate this approach that green roofs can support biodiversity. This is one of my favorite biodiverse green roofs in Met Chosin in BC. My friend Morley Milne, who some of you may know, the late and wonderful Morley. So this is her woodshed. She basically collected cuttings and seeds from her property and maybe from other areas, but literally from hand, and put them onto her woodshed. And you can see there's a combination of annuals and perennials. This is the larkspur. The sea blush was doing so well. I took these pictures in May in time for World Green Roof Day, which was June 6th. Yeah, she also scored some prickly pear. I think she got that from a Gulf island. I think that's what she said. But yeah, and of course, this is one of our native sedums, which I know that the Moss's elfin is a butterfly that uses sedum spatulifolium as its food source plant. So there's a lot of benefits from using native plants beyond just pollen and nectar. Now, this is a project I really am excited to share with you in case you don't know it. Colleagues of mine from the Green Infrastructure Consultancy out of London built London's largest living wall, and this was actually designed to reduce urban flooding. So it was installed in 2013. Let's see. There it is, 350 meters squared, 16 tons of soil, and 10,000 species of ferns and herbaceous perennials. I'm going to look at this in a bit more detail. So it was planted with over 20 plant species, both native and non-native, to ensure the wall is in bloom year-round for pollinators and other wildlife. Birds have even been found nesting in the wall. So yeah, my colleague and friend Gary Grant and Dusty Gedge together, they're just beautiful minds. They really think with nature. And yeah, this is a fantastic, for biodiversity, an amazing wall. But the amazing part, truly amazing, is that it does actually function for stormwater management too. So they're actually collecting all the rainwater from the roof in cisterns, and the water is then circulated through the living wall system and monitored by smart technology. So if there is a breach, they can be informed by text message. And they did their math. The living wall was predicted to be effective for stormwater mitigation for summer storms in London. Okay, I'm just checking. What holds it to the wall, Sheila? I believe, so you can see these long vertical ones are different from, let's see, the big expanse. It's a modular wall. So there would be structures that are holding the soil in little pockets, probably held in with a felt, and then the plants are kind of held in that way. Yeah. Normally, I'm not a big fan of living walls. I find them to be very wasteful, very expensive, but the fact that this one's actually using rainwater for its irrigation is just, like, that's the only way I believe living walls should be permitted, in fact. That's just my opinion, though. And then, of course, rain gardens are another form of green infrastructure. This is a lovely project that Chloe, who's here tonight, she shared these pictures with me yesterday, because I haven't been able to go out and check this site myself, but this is at Capilano Mall. I don't know if anyone is aware of it, but it sounds like a wonderful community project where they basically dug up bits of the parking lot and installed a rain garden. And I believe there are plans to build more. So you can kind of see the drain is at the far end, and for the water to get there, it needs to navigate its way through all these loads of soil, lots of vegetation. And rain gardens are really neat because they can dry out in between. So they're planted with species that tolerate both wet and dry conditions. Okay, so England green wall. What happens if the summer turns too dry for sufficient rainwater to water the plants? Good question, Sheila. So I believe that in the case of that living wall in London, if there is a drought and there's no more water in the cistern, then it will kick into the mains. So it'll be chlorinated water, which is not ideal. Okay, now I think this is the penultimate form of GI, the bioswale. So bioswales, by definition, are kind of long conveyances. It's like a rain garden, but it's more like a ditch, but it's nicer than a ditch. So you can see you can plant quite a range of species in there. So this is an example that my colleague Nigel built in this is London Olympic Park. You'll notice the irises and the scabious, and yeah, so kind of like a mix of wet to dry tolerant plant species. That looks like it might be spirea or hardhack. But yeah, and doesn't this just convey the multifunctionality of it? It's beautiful, it's providing food for pollinators, probably shelter for lots of other species too, managing stormwater at the same time, cooling the air, probably perfuming the air as well. Copenhagen cloudburst was the response of Copenhagen to, they had their 1 in 1,000 year storm in 2010, which was a huge rain event combined with tidal surge. So they designed this amazing cloudburst program to totally redesign the city to be prepared. So this is an example of what a bioswale might look like. You see how kind of got a cross section here. You can see that there's a perforated drainage pipe at the bottom and all these layers of soil above it. So water will only leave those plantings after a certain volume of water. Here's another example, a rendering. A lot of these are being built as we speak. So you can see how this sort of boulevard in the summer, it's quite pleasant. You know, you can have picnics there. In the winter, well, sorry, not winter, in a major storm event, it actually serves for a detention basin. And it's calculated to really reduce flooding, to hold floodwaters and prevent any of these combined sewer issues. Yeah, so 30% disconnection from existing combined sewer system. And that's what it's been designed for everyday rain. So it's kind of like, remember that figure I showed you of the green roof, where it really just reduces the runoff to such a significant effect that you can actually disconnect it from the infrastructure. Parks and green spaces are also really important. This is London Olympic Park again. You kind of see all the trees. There's mowed grass, but there's also wild grass or habitat, wetlands. So again, you've got this diversity that's just good for all beings, human and non-being alike. This is another, also again in Copenhagen, but a larger scale park scenario. I think I've got like a overlay here. So this is called St. Jørgens. And same sort of principle, you can see they've got like open park, but it is also a detention basin in the case of that 1 in 1,000 year storm. The retention capacity is all calculated. And yeah, even in a horrible weather, you can still go out walking with your umbrella. It's not a disaster. Wow, 44 minutes. So that's, in a nutshell, covering quite a lot of ground, quite a complex subject in a way. I hope you're still with me. And I'd love to answer any questions you might have or even ideas. Thank you for your attention.